Welcome to Beyond the Sugarcoat.
Let me tell you a story that quietly dismantles the lie we're all taught too early, that purpose has an expiration date, that if you didn't figure it out by your 20s, 30s, or 40s, you somehow missed the window. Because the woman I'll be telling you about had just begun at an age when most people are told to settle, to shrink their dreams, to be grateful for what is already behind them. She found her life's work not by racing the clock, but by listening when something finally lit her up from the inside. It's a story about timing, about permission, about the quiet courage it takes to begin, especially when the world thinks you're past the point of beginnings. So if you've ever wondered whether it's too late for you, you'll want to hear this story. She did not arrive in the world marked for greatness. She arrived curious, born into comfort, but not certainty. She was unusually tall for a woman, 6 feet 2 inches, if you were wondering, which made her stand out in ways she didn't choose. In a time when women were expected to be modest and contained, her physical presence alone set her slightly apart. Her father envisioned a proper future for her: marry well, behave impeccably, and remain safely within the polished world her family had built. Education mattered, but mostly as refinement, to smooth her edges, not ignite her purpose. She attended good schools, learned to write well, to think clearly, to host a proper dinner, but she did not find a calling. Her upbringing emphasized manners, not passion. She learned how to move through the world long before she learned what she wanted from it. College came and went without fireworks. She studied because capable young women were meant to, not because she felt lit from within. Afterwards, she took jobs that fit neatly on paper, but poorly in her spirit. Filing, typing, assisting, waiting. While the world rushed forward, she felt oddly unclaimed by it. Then history intervened. Pearl Harbor was bombed, and war cracked open the tidy life she had been given. She joined the effort not as a heroine, but as a worker, resourceful, observant, unexpectedly brave. For the first time, she was valued for competence rather than compliance. She stepped into responsibility, into systems that required sharp thinking and adaptability. She crossed continents during World War II, leaving the comfort of her West Coast upbringing for India. There, her days were filled with classified files, communications, and logistics. The work itself often bored her: routine tasks, repetitive hours, but the world around her quietly expanded. Living abroad loosened the edges of her sheltered life. New cultures, new conversations, new ways of thinking. The world grew larger, even when the job felt small. It was there that she encountered a man who did not immediately charm her. He, for his part, was unimpressed, finding her loud, unpolished, even chaotic, mistaking her openness for a lack of depth. She observed him with amused detachment, noticing his prominent nose, his thinning hair, the seriousness of a man nearly 10 years her elder, entirely unconcerned with impressing anyone. And yet something lingered. She sensed calm intelligence, worldly ease, a steadiness that suggested he knew who he was. That quiet confidence stayed with her longer than she expected. Time would prove them both wrong. She possessed a restless curiosity and a rare openness to learning, absorbing the world with enthusiasm and humor, unafraid to ask questions or take up space. He, by contrast, was disciplined and cultured, steeped in arts, language, and history, his confidence shaped by years of travel and careful observation. Where she brought energy and wonder, He offered structure and refinement. They began to bond not through grand declarations, but through conversation, long walks, shared meals, exchanges of ideas, each slowly recognizing in the other what they themselves lacked. Then the war shifted again. India was never meant to be permanent. Operations reorganized, orders arrived, personnel were reassigned. She was transferred as her unit wound down. He, already trusted and seasoned, was ordered onward as well. What placed them on the same path was not romance, but timing. Wartime travel was limited and slow. Routes overlapped. Groups were moved together wherever possible. And through nothing more dramatic than logistics, they found themselves leaving India as part of the same transfer flow. Colleagues suspended between assignments headed toward China. It was in that in-between space, no longer stationed, not yet arrived, that something changed. Without offices or schedules, time softened. Conversations deepened. At sea, they spoke of books, of arts, of food, of cities she had never imagined herself belonging to. Meals became rituals. Silence grew comfortable. She listened as he described a wider world. He watched as her mind opened to it, eager, unashamed, alive. By the time they reached China, they had arrived, already altered. They were not married. They were not certain. But what had begun as contrast had become complement. What had begun as coincidence had quietly become choice. This man would change the temperature of her life. In China, proximity became familiarity, and familiarity softened into affection. The war kept them busy, but not distant. They found steadiness. Conversation deepened. Laughter came more easily. What had once been intellectual exchange began to carry a warmth, then longing. She was no longer just curious about the world. She was awakening. And he, who'd once observed from careful distance, found himself drawn to her joy, her appetite for life, the way she met the unfamiliar with humor rather than fear. When the war finally loosened its grip and their overseas service ended, they returned to the United States together. Back home, away from uniforms and assignments, the bond had only strengthened. He encouraged her curiosity, never shrinking it, never correcting it into submission. She trusted his steadiness, his faith in her mind, his belief that life could still expand no matter the age at which one began. In 1946, she married him. Marriage did not cage her, it widened her. She was 34 years old, an age when many women of her time were already defined by what they had settled for. Little did she know her life was just about to lead her into the best chapters. With him, she would leave America again. When his diplomatic work took him to France, she arrived curious, but still unclaimed by any great passion. France was beautiful, yes, but beauty alone had never been enough to anchor her. It was meant to be another place she would observe rather than inhabit. They arrived in France not by plane, but by ship. After crossing the Atlantic, she and her husband disembarked and climbed into their sky blue Buick station wagon, nicknamed the Bleu Flash, beginning the long drive to Paris. Along the way, they stopped for lunch in Rouen. The restaurant was an unassuming inn that had been standing since 1345, quietly serving travelers for centuries. What was meant to be a simple pause in the journey became something far more significant. And it was there that she experienced a meal that would change her life forever. Oysters fresh from the sea, sole bathed in butter, a salad dressing with respect, wine that belonged exactly where it was. For the first time, food was not fuel or obligation. It was art, patience, and joy. She later said it was the most exciting meal of her life. As they returned to the road and continued on toward Paris, she did not realize it yet, but the woman who arrived in France was not the same woman who left the table at lunch. It would change the trajectory of her life. In Paris, the memory followed her, not as nostalgia, but as a question. How had something so simple tasted so complete? What knowledge lived behind that plate? She realized she did not just want to eat food like that, she wanted to understand it. She did something quite radical. At an age when most women of her time were expected to refine what they already knew, she chose to begin. She enrolled in basic cooking class for housewives at Cordon Bleu. She failed often, burned sauces, was corrected repeatedly by teachers who did not care that she was older, foreign, or female. She loved it. Mastery, she learned, was earned, not gifted. Her personal life remained steady, grounded by a partnership that prized intellect and mutual admiration over ego. There were no dramatic scandals, no reinventions through youth. Her power came from staying curious, staying devoted, staying willing to begin again at an age when others had decided this was far as life would go. The kitchens were unforgiving. Precision mattered, timing mattered, discipline mattered. She was not the most naturally graceful student, and she was often underestimated. But she was relentless. She took notes obsessively, asked questions no one else thought to ask, practiced again and again until understanding replaced instinct. Outside of class, she studied even harder. She cooked, she failed, she tried again. She began translating what she learned, not just from French to English, but from mystery into method. Soon, she found other women who loved food deeply, seriously, without pretension. Together they cooked, tested, argued, refined. What began as shared lessons slowly turned into something larger, a mission to make French cooking intelligible, not intimidating. She was no longer just learning how to cook, she was learning how to teach. What followed was not instant success, it was hard work. She began the book the way she did everything else, methodically, obsessively, without shortcuts. Recipes were tested and retested, sometimes a dozen times over. Instructions rewritten until they could not be misunderstood. She was determined that no reader would be left guessing, intimidated, or ashamed for not already knowing. Years passed this way. When the manuscript was finally finished, it was enormous, dense, detailed, unapologetically thorough. And when it was sent out, the response was not enthusiasm. It was rejection. Publishers said it was too long, too complicated, too serious for the average American cook. She refused to cut corners, refused to dilute the work. Eventually, the book found its home, and in 1961 it was published, not as a trend piece, but as a declaration. You are capable of more than you think. The reception was respectful, positive, but not explosive. Then, almost by accident, came television. To promote the book, she was invited onto a local public television program in Boston to demonstrate a recipe. No one expected much. She arrived nervous, unscripted, utterly herself. Butter splashed, laughter escaped, mistakes were handled out loud, and something clicked. Viewers didn't see a chef performing perfection. They saw a woman teaching courage. Phones rang, letters arrived. People wanted more. Not more recipes, more her. And before long, she was offered her own show. In 1963, her show debuted nationally. There was no script in the traditional sense, no glossy set, no illusion of perfection, just a woman, a kitchen, and the radical idea that confidence could be taught. She cooked boldly, she encouraged mistakes, she reminded viewers that dinner could be saved, and so could they. Never apologize, she told them, and in doing so, she gave an entire generation permission to try. What followed was not just fame, but influence. Cookbooks multiplied, episodes stacked up, a new language of food entered American homes. At 55 years old, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She was not at the beginning of her career. She was in the thick of it. Her show was thriving. She underwent a mastectomy and then did what she had always done. She continued. She returned to work, to teaching, to creating, quietly proving that resilience did not require announcement. She had not broken in quietly. She had broken open a door. In the United States, she was named a National Endowment for the Humanities Jefferson Lecturer, the government's highest honor for intellectual achievement in the humanities, not for academic, but for being accessible, for turning mastery into invitation. Her television work earned her multiple Emmy Awards, recognizing not just a cooking show, but a new kind of public education, one where curiosity mattered more than polish, and mistakes were part of the lesson. In 2003, the highest civilian honor in the country followed. She was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, not for celebrity, but for cultural impact, for reshaping American kitchens, confidence, and conversation. Universities followed. Honorary degrees arrived from institutions across the country, acknowledging what formal education had not predicted, that learning does not expire and influence does not require early arrival. And when she passed, the legacy did not close. Her kitchen was preserved at the Smithsonian Institution, installed piece by piece as a living artifact. Who was this woman who found her incredible life bursting into explosion in her 50s? She was Julia Child. She did not discover her calling early. One question at a time, one recipe at a time. And it all began because she paid attention to a meal, to her curiosity, and to the quiet realization that it was never too late to begin. One is never too tall, too much, or too unusual. She kept going anyway. If you find yourself asking, is this all there is? Ask, what else is possible?